US scenic train travel isn't the best to plan, but it's not impossible, and I'm gonna show you how. People tend to have hit or miss experiences with it, but I've had some of the most incredible travel experiences taking scenic train rides to California, to Canada, to the Pacific Northwest, and even up the Pacific Coast Highway, and even to Chicago, because I'm in Milwaukee. It's only an hour and a half. So I am pretty well versed on train travel, and I want to make the process easier for you to plan your first US train trip. So the first thing you need to do is not search by city, but search by routes. So if you Google Amtrak routes, it'll take you to the page that says amtrak.com/train-routes. And that is the page you want to start on. Unlike other forms of train travel, perhaps in other countries, Amtrak has over 30 routes already planned out. So you just need to figure out where you can hop on or where you need to go to experience that route. I recommend making a list of 3 to 5 routes that sound interesting to you. And if you do want more clear-cut examples on scenic train routes, I do have a blog post on the most scenic train rides in the US that you can look at. I will say a lot of them lean West Coast heavy. So if you are on the East Coast, don't worry, I have some train adventures planned so I can give y'all all the recommendations too. So after you make your list of 3 to 5 routes, something you should also be looking for on that page is how long those routes are, because you need to determine how long you're willing to stay on a train. As you're going through that page and you're going to the different routes, you can see that some are 35 hours or 17 hours or 8 hours or 52 hours or 48 hours. Amtrak measures their routes in hours, and that's how long you will be on the train. So you need to figure out if you want to do a longer train route or a shorter train route. And if you are a bit on the fence, I would recommend doing a shorter train route. Just see how you like it. Train travel, as much as I love it, I know it's not for everyone, so you need to figure out what works best for you. However, I will say the more scenic routes like the California Zephyr, the Empire Builder, and the Coast Starlight, which are known as the 3 most scenic Amtrak routes in the country, are some of the longer routes. So if those are a bit daunting for you, I recommend trying the Amtrak Cascades, or even if you're on the East Coast, doing a shorter route like New York to DC or New York to Boston, where it doesn't seem as long as 52 hours or you're not spending multiple nights on a train. So once you have idea of some routes and how long you're willing to be on the train, you need to figure out what kind of views you want to see. And this may be hinted based on the routes you wrote on your list, those 3 to 5 routes, but you need to determine what kind of views you want on your scenic train ride. I know when I was looking at booking my first train ride, I wanted the most scenic train ride in the country, which is the California Zephyr, and that one goes through the Rocky Mountains as well as the Sierra Nevada mountains. But if you're someone who wants more of a coastal vibe, you can take the Coast Starlight from LA to Seattle, or you just want to be by some water, you can do the Amtrak Cascades from Portland, Oregon to Vancouver, Canada. All of them I have done, all of them I recommend. The sites are beautiful, but they do vary. So if you are someone who is very particular about the kind of sites they want to see on their scenic train ride, I recommend going through those routes and seeing the highlights, which you can see once you scroll to the bottom to all the different stops that those trains will make. The Empire Builder wasn't as scenic as the California Zephyr, and also the views were vastly different. You got more of the Southwest, the drier terrain through the California Zephyr on the Denver to Sacramento segment of the train ride, which is the most scenic segment. And then on the Empire Builder, it felt more lush, more green as you went through Glacier National Park. So you kind of have to go and look at the pictures of the different stops that they're going to make to see which views are speaking to you. After you do all of that, the one you book is probably going to be determined by your budget, which is a big factor for a lot of people who want to train travel in the US. We know that train travel is not as accessible in the US, and also it can get expensive. As someone like me who goes solo and books the roumettes, I pay as much as $800 for my ride on the California Zephyr. So it really does depend on your budget on if you're going to do the roumette or if you're going to do coach. And if you do the roumette, you do not have to go solo. There are 2 beds in the roomette. I will say it can get a bit tight, but it is doable depending on the route that you want to take. So as you're balancing your budget, you may have picked a route that doesn't require an overnight stay. Not all of the scenic train routes require overnight stay. I know the Cascades from Portland to Vancouver did not require an overnight stay, and one ride on my bucket list is the one from New York to Niagara Falls, and neither one of those on the East Coast requires an overnight stay. So this may not be a big factor for you, but you do need to look to your budget to see, are you going to be riding in coach, in a roomette, or in business class if the route that you chose offers it. Some other helpful tips you should be mindful of as you are planning your scenic train ride is the season of your scenic train ride. Now, depending on the views you want to see, this may vary on when is the best time for you to take the ride. For example, the California Zephyr I took in July, so I got a very clear, sunny view of the mountains, but there are people who like that route in the winter time. You should be asking yourself, do you want to be cozy and warm? Do you want to see fall foliage? All those things can factor into when is the best time to book your scenic train ride. Though if you do want pretty decent weather year round, I'll recommend booking a train ride between end of May and end of August. However, if you do want to see the leaves change, then of course you book in October or November. You can book the trains year round. So again, knowing what sites you want to see and also how you want to see them is the best way to book the train ride that is best for you. Now it is time to book your train ride. So once you have all of those things figured out, you can probably narrow down your train ride to the one that makes the most sense for you scenically and financially, and you are all ready to go. So I recommend going on Amtrak's website, and if you haven't already, creating a free account with them. It's an easy way to rack up points. And if you're about to do a long overnight cross-country train ride, those points will come in handy. I've gotten some free shorter train rides on Amtrak because I've taken so many of the Amtrak routes, so do not sleep on their guest reward points. And when it's time to book, you'll look at the route that you chose. So for example, if you chose the Coast Starlight, which goes from LA to Seattle, that's the route that I took, but there are other ways you can start and stop. You can start in Seattle and end in LA, whichever way works for you. Once you know your starting point and your ending point based on the route, remember, use the route, do not just put in two random cities, then you are ready to book. So put in the dates that you want to go put in one way around trip. Most people decide to only take the train one way because the system doesn't really have a round trip. Like, you could go round trip, but you will be on the train for like a very long time doing it round trip. So most people take the train one way and fly back the other way. And then a screen will pop up and it'll show you all the different times that you can take the train on those days. You may need to adjust to find the best price. Sometimes it's cheaper to leave on a Thursday than a Friday. So it really depends on your work schedule and what works best for you. But what I want you to pay attention to as you're booking is the icon that has the train. So this is where a lot of people get tripped up and they get really confused because they end up booking the right cities but the wrong train. So Amtrak does tell you what trains you will be on, and if you have to make some layovers, it may say mixed service, but if you're going on a route from start to finish, the name of the route will pop up. So for example, for the Coast Starlight, if I were to put in LA to Seattle, I should look for the train that says Coast Starlight because that means I am booking the right train. However, this can vary based on where you're leaving from. So for example, taking the train from Chicago to California required me to go from Milwaukee to Chicago first. So it did say mixed service under that train icon, but if you click it, you can also see the details of what trains you're taking so that you know you are booking that scenic train ride. It is one of the biggest reasons why people end up taking the wrong trip, because they do all this research, looking up the routes, and end up booking the train that has multiple trains or way more trains than necessary to take the route that you chose. So be sure to look at that train icon and read what train is listed underneath so you know that you are taking the right one. Another helpful tip that I already kind of mentioned but want to reiterate is knowing how you're going to get back home. You have to know, because when you book the train ride, you're going to need to book it one way or round trip. Round trip means you'll be on the train longer, and also this will affect your budget budget. So you will probably have to take a train and also a plane at some point to make a US train trip possible, because we don't currently have the infrastructure to do really fast bullet trains, or the connections can be a bit long. So depending upon how much time you have off, you will need to decide how you're going to get back. If you're going to book a round trip ticket on the train, or you're going to take the train one way and fly home the next. And also, when you're thinking about how you're getting home, you have to decide if you are going to stay in the city that you're ending in on the train ride for a certain amount of days. For example, I ended up going to San Francisco for a few days after taking the California Zephyr. However, in Portland, I had already been there before, so I only stayed in Portland for one day before going from Portland to Vancouver, where I stayed for 2 days. So it really depends on your personal travel style and where you have been, but definitely factoring that into how you get home can be the deciding factor on how long you stay after your train ride. And the last tip you absolutely have to know, and that I cannot stress enough, is do not plan anything, no activities, no tours for the day your train will arrive. Because Amtrak does share the tracks with the freight, and it's not just an Amtrak system, delays are common and very much possible. I had a 7-hour delay went to the California Zephyr before the Empire Builder and the Amtrak Cascades and the Coast Starlight. I didn't have any delays for them, but when they can delay, it will be a hefty delay. So you don't want to overbook or overplan yourself the day your train arrives. So I recommend not booking anything that day except for your hotel or your Airbnb or wherever you're staying in your final city once you get off the train, because it'll be a headache if your train is late and then you have to go back and rebook or cancel activities that you already have planned. So if you're taking the train from New York to Montreal, stay a day in Montreal before doing anything. Do not plan to go to another Canadian city. If you're going from Seattle to LA, do not plan on leaving LA that night, just to build in time just in case if your train is delayed. As someone who's taken the train most of her life, train travel or scenic train travel was not something I thought I'd be doing at this time in my life, but it's been such an amazing experience. I've learned a lot about US infrastructure and travel and why we can't do things, and seeing some of the national parks without actually having to get out of the train, which has really been good for me as a solo traveler, because I don't want to hike by myself. I don't want to take a road trip by myself, and having a scenic train ride as an option is a great way to do some sightseeing without having to plan too much and without having to do too much in general, because the sights are literally coming to you. So I hope this video was helpful in helping you plan your scenic train ride in the US. If you have any comments or questions, drop them below, or tell me your tips for scenic train travel, or if you have a route in the US that I haven't gone on that you would recommend I try, let me know in the comments below. I'm always looking for cool places to visit in the US, and I hope this video has helped you plan that trip too. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all at my next video. Bye everyone, stay curious.